Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Biohacking Beauty podcast, where we delve into the science of looking and feeling our best. I'm your host, Amitay, co-founder and CEO of Young Goose, the world's first biohacking skincare company, the company that this product is brought to you, that this podcast is brought to you by. So what we do here in this podcast, each episode, we bring you insights and strategies to hack your natural beauty from the inside out. Today, I am here with the incredible Dr. Stephanie Estima, an expert in the fields of metabolism, body composition, and the intricate world of female health. Dr. Estima specializes in the application of diet, intermittent fasting, and exercise physiology to female hormonal health, making her a beacon of knowledge for anyone looking to understand their body better and optimize their health and appearance. In our conversation, Dr. Estima will share her insights on the changes in metabolism and energy we experience in our 30s, 40s, and 50s and beyond, and why resistance training could be the secret weapon against aging. We'll explore how these shifts in our body's functionality can impact our skin health and appearance, and why understanding this is crucial for anyone looking to maintain their youthful glow. Moreover, Dr. Estima and I will connect her vast expertise back to skincare, discussing the importance of collagen and protein supplementation, and the fascinating evidence that resistance training not only benefits our muscles, but can also benefit our skin and stave off some of the aging, the effects of the aging process on the skin, promoting more elasticity and reducing signs of aging like wrinkles, and improving hydration as well. Before we dive into our conversation today, I first want to share a review from one of our valued Biohacking Beauty listeners. So, someone wrote, "So brilliant and inspiring. The knowledge of the interviewer and the guests is so informative and information that I can use right away." So thank you very much, Jen. Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words. If you haven't done so already, we would greatly appreciate it if you could take 2 seconds out of your day to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you're listening to this podcast. Even a one-word review would be amazing, because your ratings and reviews greatly help the growth of this podcast, which helps us educate more people. But now, without further ado, please welcome Dr. Stephanie Estima. All right, Stephanie, welcome to the Biohacking Beauty podcast.
I am delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
It is absolutely my pleasure. So as I told you off air, the idea of having you on, obviously you're extremely interesting, but the idea started by me listening to you as a consumer, as an enthusiast on Natalie Needham's podcast, Becoming Superhuman podcast, and I was like, oh my God, we got to have her on, because she's speaking about everything that I would like people to speak about here on the podcast, but never were spoken about. So
Right.
I'm very excited to have you on.
Well, I can't wait. I can't wait to see where this is going to go.
Yeah. So actually, there's a question I often ask, which is, I believe in the health and wellness world, there are two types of people. The first are people like myself who are just big nerds, and that's where their interest lies. There's no real explanation to it. It's like, yeah, I'm interested in longevity, and that is where I'd like to see results. And the other one, the majority, I would say, are people who have gone through some type of difficulty, some type of health challenge, and overcame it. And now they're here to kind of help other people overcome their challenges. So where would you define yourself on that scale, on that spectrum?
Oh my goodness. I actually feel like I sort of straddle both of them because I
Hmm.
really am a nerd like you. I love to understand mechanisms and pathophysiology, what the difference is between disease states and salutogenesis, and what are some of the things that we can do to promote health. So I'm a super nerd there. And I would also say that through a variety of life events, struggled with some aspects of my health and really wasn't getting some of the answers that
Yeah,
I thought I should have easily come. And I went on my
yeah,
own journey of self discovery and figuring those out. So, in terms of my own health story, I've always been relatively healthy. So, paid my way through, I'm a chiropractor by training, very proud to be a chiropractor, neuromusculoskeletal love, right? So, love everything about brains, muscles, and bones. Paid my way through that school by being a fitness instructor. It was like, I'm going to date myself here, but I was like teaching step, like step classes and hip hop and all of that. Taibo, if anyone remembers Taibo.
uh-huh. Only
Um,
from the train song,
from the train song. What's that?
uh, "Drops of Jupiter." Is it by Train?
Oh,
He says
oh
she
my
she
gosh.
she she does Taibo.
Oh, is that right? Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I can't
never
even
mind.
get that reference. I'm such a nerd. I'm sorry. No, but like I was teaching, the guy, Billy, whatever his last name was, certified as a Taibo instructor, all of that. But the one thing where I always struggled was in my menstrual cycle. So my menstrual
Hmm.
cycle was always like the week leading up to bleed week. And then when my period started, very, very difficult. So I'd often have to medicate. I would often have to take days off of school at the time. So I would have to stay home from school because just the cramping and the pain from like my low back to my knees was just excruciating. I had headaches. I was very sensitive to light, like all that kind of stuff. And couldn't really figure it out. Like the only answer I ever got was here's some Anaprox or here's some medication for
Yeah.
it. And, this is just kind of what it is. And it really only wasn't until I had a couple of life events sort of all congregate at the same time. I was going through a divorce with very young children. So anyone out there who has ever been through something like that, a breakup or a divorce, you know how emotionally painful that is. My clinic at the time also burned down, like within the same,
Wow.
I know, within the
Maybe
same.
it was your ex-husband. No.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. It's funny because I had a fire in the clinic and then I ended up reopening, like redoing and like creating the clinic of my dreams. And then we had a flood and I was like, all right, so there's
Wow.
fire, there's flood. Like the only thing next is locusts. I think we have like the trilogy of of the
Yeah.
catastrophes. But anyway, so I had this fire. So my clinic was burned down. I didn't have a clinic. And so I took my kids, it was the summer, I took my kids to we went on summer vacation to Italy and we were there for a couple of weeks. I think it was three, like more, maybe a little bit more than three, with travel days and stuff. So it was like 3 weeks that we were there. And during that time, like towards the end of the vacation, I got my period and it was wonderful. So, the 3 weeks that we were there, despite having back at home, no clinic, separated from my husband at the time, we had been going for long walks. We had been getting lots of sunshine. We had been playing in the water together and like all the fun things that you do with your kids when they're younger and you're on vacation. And so I first was like, well, it's just because I'm in Italy and everything is just better here. The salty sea and the beautiful food and the sunshine. But the one thing that was constant, of course, was my body, right? My body
Yeah.
was the same as it is in North America. I'm from Toronto, Canada, so East Coast. So it's the same on the East Coast as it is in Europe. So what is the difference? Is the environment different? Sure. But also the way that I've been living is different as well. So I came back from that trip and wanting to kind of figure out and piece together how I could recreate that environment. Maybe I can't have the Italian sun, like the beautiful sun or whatever that they have, but we have pretty good summers in Toronto.
Hmm.
How can I recreate the conditions for a body that feels like it's thriving? And I think I said this on Nat's, I can't remember if we were on air or we were talking afterwards, but I was saying to her, it felt like I felt like a goddess. Like I felt like on my period, I felt like I was menstruating like a goddess. And I said, I always want
Wow.
to feel like this. I never want to feel like it's a burden, like it's a curse. This is my curse for being a woman, all this kind of stuff. So that set me on a path of discovery and trying to figure out how do I need to eat? What are some of the daily habits that are very small that we tend to skip over, like getting morning sunlight, having some light movement in the morning, making sure that I make time for play, connecting with people that I love. How can I do all of those things on a daily basis, as well as get all the other things in my life that needs, having technical proficiency as a doctor, and making sure that I'm serving my patients and paying my bills and all the things. So that was my big story. I wrote about this in my book, The Betty Body, which is named after my podcast, by the way. It's, people are like, what's a Betty? I'm like, well, these are the people that listen to my podcast. They call themselves Betties. So if you are someone who listens to podcasts like this one and you feel like you want to jump on another one, you can certainly hop on over to mine and see if you like it. But the book, we called it The Betty Body. And it was really all about, how do you eat? How do you train? How do you sleep? What are some of the daily practices as a woman that are unique and distinct from our beautiful men? I love men. It's not anti-men. We love men, but we're also distinct creatures from men in many ways, in terms of our physiology, our reproductive cycle, metabolism in many ways. Risk for certain diseases are for many women much higher. And, now that I'm navigating perimenopause, like now I'm a 46-year-old woman, what are some of the strategies that I need to also make sure that I have in place as I'm navigating a time where I'm moving towards menopause? So sort of that's the back of the envelope. I rambled on there a little bit, but that's the back of the envelope sort of story in terms of my own health journey. And, it does have a happy ending. Like I have a beautifully regular cycle now. It's like 29 days every month. I know exactly when it's coming. And I've been practicing these things now for, gosh, what year are we in now? 24. So this happened, the clinic burned down in 2016. So how many years is that? 8 years. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, did you, you're talking about your menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
Back then, when you were under obviously external pressure, stress, life, whatever that is, and you were getting those challenges as far as like menstruation.
Yeah.
Did you relate it to lifestyle at all?
No, because I thought I was healthy, right? It's like, I'm the fitness instructor. I'm the girl that works out. I'm the one who's doing cardio all the time. Because I was also a cardio bunny, like the step and the high low and all that. Like, I thought what I was doing was doing right by my body. Right. And of course I had formal education, right? I had a professional formal education that also reinforced this idea that what I was doing was right. So I was getting a lot of movement. It was high intensity movement for the most part, but looking back now, is probably not enough weight training and too much cardio, like too much high intensity interval training and too much like zone 5 and 6 training. Not a focus on zone 2, not a focus on recovery, not enough. Like I was lifting weights, but not as often and not as heavy as I could have been. So there were things that I was doing that even at the time, my formal education and society at large was saying, yeah, no, you're healthy. You're eating, whole foods. And I would argue I wasn't having enough protein. There's all these different things that I can, hindsight's always 2022, right? Like you can always look back and be like, oh, I was doing that and that and that and that wrong. But certainly at the time, I didn't actually relate the environmental stressors and the way that I was moving and the way that I was managing recovery, or I should say not managing recovery, and how that was playing into my monthly cycle. And I wrote about this in the book, and I talk about this idea that every month your body kind of gives you a report card, right? It's like A-, B+, C, fail, So depending on kind of some of the symptoms that you're getting, if you're not correcting for that in the next cycle of your life, you're going to get the same report card the next month, right? So in some ways, I would say women have an advantage because we have this physical sign, right? We have this physical sign, which is our menstrual cycle, to kind of tell us how we're doing. And we have this beautiful ability to replenish, right? You lose blood. And then of course that drives the formation of new blood, right? So we always are sort of turning over our blood, maybe more so and more efficiently than men. And actually, just a funny side story, my husband and I, we have, we go for an annual, I tend to run my blood test like every 6 months, and our annual just came up where we did all of our blood tests. We do all the things with our doctor, and his physician said to him, you should think about maybe giving blood. You have so much iron in your blood. You should think about giving blood like maybe once a month, once every 6 weeks. And I was like, what he's trying to do there is replicate what women naturally do, which is we naturally get rid of excess heme. We get rid of it. If you're someone who tends to store a lot of iron, you can actually very easily get rid of that every month, right? If you're a woman, because you're bleeding every month. So anyway, just like a funny little, like maybe a little tangent there, but women in a way have this sense of renewal. We have this ability to renew every month, and your body will tell you how you're doing at life, essentially every month as well.
And I think, you're talking about how you can reframe this as a gift by, having the story about the men needing to donate blood.
Yeah.
But I think there is even a better reframe of that gift, which is that report card is actually a very short window of cause and effect.
Sure.
Because we as human beings are actually, to say horrible is minimizing that. Horrible at understanding long-term cause and effect. So if I eat the burger today, I'm not going to be, 300 pounds tomorrow, but cumulatively, if I eat burgers every day, obviously, and burgers are actually good for you, but I'm saying like the McDonald's.
If you eat the French fries with the burger.
Exactly, the French fries and the bun, and put the Heinz ketchup or whatever that is. Yeah, but I think it is actually very, very, very advantageous if you are getting those reads on how your body behaves and you're trying to, I would say, aim at a better, 5-day, 7-day window. If we want to put luteal phase there, like a 2-week window out of the month, that actually is an extremely beneficial gift for us to get, for women to get long term in the way that they live their lives. I think it's much more than just the menstrual cycle.
I would agree 100% with you. I think, I've talked about this in the past. I feel a lot of times, I mean, at least my experience growing up, having your period or anyone knowing that you were on your period was like the most mortifying thing. You would just, if you got your period unexpectedly, you sort of had to whisper to your friend, like, do you have a tampon? And you'd like hide it in your pocket as you like sort of shuffle to the bathroom. And I think what I'm hopeful for with my work, and there are others who are talking about the importance of paying attention to your menstrual cycle as a vital sign. So in the same way that you might pay attention to your HRV or your respiratory rate or your blood pressure or your heart rate, to monitor those vitals, as a woman, we have an extra vital sign, which is what is the quality and quantity in some sense of your menstrual cycle as well. And the luteal phase in particular, to your point, has often been sort of like, oh, there she goes again, on the rag, or she's like, she must be PMSing. And for this is a time not only of, there's a lot of metabolic and physiological changes that is happening for a woman, but she's also much more exquisitely sensitive to her environment, right? So I will often joke and say, you might be watching like a commercial about, dishwasher tabs, and, it makes you emotional for whatever reason, right? Because you're just exquisitely more sensitive to some of the emotional landscape, both externally and internally. And this is also an opportunity for you to look at and evaluate what are some of the things that are working in your life and what are some of the things that are not working. If your boss tends to get on your nerves every luteal phase, like every 4 weeks, like clockwork, your boss starts getting on your nerves, or your husband starts getting on your nerves every 4 weeks, right around the time when you're in your luteal phase, maybe it's not your boss, maybe it's not your husband, maybe there's some residue there, or there's a conversation that you're avoiding having, or there's something that needs to be cleared that continues to come up every month. So in some ways, it's almost like it's almost a message. It's almost your body's trying to talk to you and send you the message like, hey, there's, you need to have a conversation with your sister about X, or you need to have a conversation with your boss about X, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think that it's actually it's a beautiful time for your sensitivity to sort of pick up, like your sort of antennas, if you will, to pick up where are some of the areas in your life that you are misaligned, so that in the next cycle you can strive towards creating alignment in the next cycle of your life.
Yeah. That's why I make sure I get on Anastasia's nerves every day. That is,
Just to make sure.
we want to be consistent.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah. Well, and we can see it in skin health. Obviously, we can see it long term in skin health, right?
Sure.
We can see how if we treat our body and kind of follow the correct steps in treating our body during those different stages of the menstrual cycle. Obviously, our skin's going to look better at the end of the day, but we can actually also implement some strategies in skincare according to where you are in your menstrual cycle. If you have more estrogen, you can produce more collagen, for example. So you can time your what we call push periods, where you push your skin a little bit further according to where you are. So in the first kind of 2 weeks, if we start after menstruation, for example, so
Yeah.
the first 2 weeks we can push our skin more, and then obviously taper off and create a more healing, softer routine for the latter part of the menstrual cycle. So
Mm-hmm.
so it is going macro, but can also go micro. So I think it's again a beautiful way to have a relationship with your actions that is you get the benefits quite quickly. What about working out? How much is it? So you mentioned you mentioned food, you mentioned eating, but what about working out? How much is that changing according to where you are in the menstrual cycle, do you think?
I think that for the women that I've surveyed, most women feel different in terms of their mood, affect, motivation, water retention, even like that changes over the course of the cycle. I think that we can also, so the first thing I'll say is always check in with yourself, right? So I'm going to talk about, and I talk about this in the book as well, about different times of the month where you can really push it. As you were saying, like the follicular phase is a really for your skin, but I would also posit that in your weight training and also in your diet, you can push the boundaries in the follicular phase, so bleed week and then the week leading up to ovulation. And then in the luteal phase, for many women, they feel more clumsy. They feel more bloated. They don't have the motivation. They feel weaker and they feel uncoordinated. So typically, what I'll say is in the first 2 weeks, this is where you're going to try to go for some of your PRs or your personal records, right? So if you're lifting heavy, this is a time that you can push that. The other thing around that, of course, too, is when we look at the hormonal composition of a woman's body, of course, she's changing every single day, unlike men, right? So we see this surge in estrogen, as you had mentioned. We have this surge in estradiol for women who are in their fertile years. And that happens somewhere around, depending on the length of your cycle, it's going to be somewhere around day 7 or 8 of your cycle, and it's going to last for about 50 hours. And then you're going to see kind of a drop off of the estradiol. It's sort of a plummetous drop. And then we'll see other hormones come up right before you ovulate, luteinizing hormone and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
So for training, I like to look at it week by week. So bleed week, I typically will say, for some women who feel kind of bloated and achy and crampy the first day or two, like as the uterus is contracting, you can have a recovery day, you can have a rest day. If you feel up to it, I typically train, day 1 or 2 of my period. And it's usually moderate weights. So something that I can lift for somewhere between 10 and 12 repetitions. And then by rep 12, like I'm really struggling to execute the movement with good form. Like my form is starting to break around 10, rep 11, rep 12. In week 2, we have that estradiol, as I mentioned, that estradiol surge. We also have testosterone for women surging. So unlike men who sort of have regular circadian fluxes of testosterone, women have a monthly flux of testosterone. And our peak is usually somewhere around, again, day 10, assuming that you have about a 28 or 29 day cycle. It's around day 10, at some point in week 2. So this is also a great time to be pushing with heavy weights. And when I say heavy, it's like 5 to 7 repetitions. So it's much
Hmm.
heavier than maybe bleed week. Like it might almost be double the weight. You probably need a spotter to make sure that the weight doesn't fall on you, or that you can't get out of the squat, or or whatever, or the bench press, or whatever you happen to be doing. And so I like to really push it that week, and then as after ovulation, I almost like to start like a almost. I don't want to call it a deload, but it's kind of a deload. So you go from 5 to 7 back to that week 3. You'll go 10 to 12 again, because we see estrogen come up again in week 3. And then in week 4, everything just, for most women, everything drops off. Estrogen drops off, progesterone drops off, testosterone's not really there. So it's usually, I will structure it like a deload week. So you're going to pull back the weights. So the weights become much lighter, and you're going to punch out higher reps. So you're
Yeah.
punching out 15 reps, 20 reps, maybe 25 or even 30 reps. The whole structure of this is that you want to be irrespective of what week you're in, you want to be moving as close to failure as you can without necessarily failing. You don't need the muscles to fail. You just have to kind of approximate it.
Yeah.
One of the things that we know from a multitude of studies is most people don't work close to failure. They just do, like, they go like, all right, I've done 10, I'll stop. Right. It's like, you got to work until the muscle doesn't want to work anymore. Like if you're not grunting and, like squishing of your face and, like you're not really close to the levels that we're talking about. And sometimes you have to break that rule. So I always say, like, that's kind of the general flow that I typically follow over the course of a month. It's like moderate weight, heavy weight, moderate weight, lightweight, right? So it's like 8 to 10, 5 to 7, 8 to 10, and then like 15 to 30 repetitions.
Hmm.
And I will also break that rule if I'm, let's say in week 4, I'm feeling like I have a particular burst of energy for whatever reason. I'm sleeping like a boss. Everything's going right. I'm in a great mood, etc. I
Just
will,
want to say that
yeah.
as a boss, sleeping like a boss means very, very poorly. I just want to say that. I'm kidding.
Right. Well, I'll say, let me reframe that. Sleeping well. Okay. So
I'm kidding.
my children are not coming into my bedroom. I'm not sick or anything like that. I will break that rule. So I will go in. So this is kind of the concept of auto regulation, right? So it's like, okay, I know kind of where I am in my cycle. This is my plan. And I can also abandon it if I'm feeling particularly strong and I really want to have at it in the weight room. So I always like to pre-frame my theory or my method by saying, if you feel like breaking it, you totally can and you should. And I have also
Yeah.
broken my own rules many a time. Like there's been many a time around ovulation where I should be lifting my heaviest, and I'm tired as hell and I don't want to do. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to do 20 reps, lightweight. I'm just going to rep it out today. I'm just going to do a higher volume day because I just don't have it in me mentally, physically, spiritually, whatever, to really push hard. So feel free to break the rules as often as you like and use that as a template. That's how, as a woman who's cycling, even if you're in perimenopause, I use that as a template for honoring the flux and the flow and the changes of your cycle over the course of the month, because you're not a man. Men are typically the same, generally typically the same every single day of the month, every single day of the year, etc., year over year. I mean, certainly we see like some decline in hormones over time, but they don't follow like a monthly rhythm in the way that women do.
Yeah.
So I do like to distinguish and say, like, we're not just like smaller versions of men with like these pesky hormones that, cause us to have our period here and there. It's like, you really do want to honor the differences between men and women, and they're beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Within those parameters, because I do want to stay within the parameters of physical fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And I do definitely have some questions around the aging, just general aging and physical fitness. But maybe before we really move on to that, if someone's listening to us and is not working out or is not lifting heavy for that matter, or that only does Taibo, what is the benefits of, why should someone book their first gym session, lifting session today or tomorrow? What are the benefits of starting now that we cannot replicate by starting, later on in life or yeah.
Yeah, good. That's a great question. It's like, why is this important? Why do we care? Right?
Why do we
Like,
care? And why
yeah,
do
why
we
do we
care
care?
right now? Maybe
Yeah.
someone feels great. They're 25 or 30 years of age.
Hmm.
And, they look in the mirror, they're saying everything's in place. I eat lettuce and, sweet potatoes and a little bit of chicken. And I look how I want to look. What are they missing out on? And what can they look for? 10, 20, 30 years from now, if they do not build that ever so important habit. Because, to connect to what you said before, why should you give yourself a discount? It's because the sacred thing there is not the weight that's on the bar. The sacred thing is the habit that you're preserving.
Hmm.
Everything else is semantics, really. So why is it so important to start early?
Okay, so there's a
With those
lot of different
questions.
ways I want to answer this question. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to remember all of them. Let's just talk first about um, why lean tissue is important. So
Mhm.
when you are young, if you're a 25-year-old listening to the show and you're like, I don't need that. I got to do my Pilates and I do my cardio and I look good. Yeah, and you probably do, and that will change in 10 years. 15 years, 20, 30 years, because what happens, of course, over time is if you are not applying a mechanical load to the muscles, it's like a use it or lose it principle, right?
Yeah.
Your muscles are metabolically expensive tissue to maintain. So if you are not using it, your body's like, well, I'm just going to we don't need this. She's not using it. So we're just going to get rid of it, use it as energy, and then over time, you are going to have to diet more aggressively. You're going to have to do more cardio. You're going to have to do more restrictive behaviors in order to just maintain where you are.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. So you may be able to kind of get away with eating what you want now and doing the cardio and maybe not necessarily engaging in weights. But that will change, decade over decade, right? And like the whole point of aging, I know that in society we are typically very scared of aging, but it's also such a privilege. It's such a
Yeah.
when you think about, some of the world of, you think about what's going on, like there's wars everywhere in the Middle East, and there's like, we are so privileged to be alive every single day and not to worry that, there's bombs falling on our homes and our children and all the things, right? So it's a privilege to age, and we want to age well. Right. I
Yeah.
always talk about this idea of, and this is borrowed. I've heard it before, but I like to think about this idea of like being like a kick-ass grandmother. Like that's what I sort of think about. It's like I'm a mom now of teenage boys, and I am looking forward to if I have the honor of being invited into the grandmother club, right? And like being able to have a child to play with and all of that kind of thing. So I think about what are some of the things that I need as a grandmother. Maybe I'll be 70 or 80 or 90 when that happens. I want to be able to at least lift my own body weight. A baby in a little pram, right? Or not a pram, but like in one of those little car seats. That car seat by itself is about 10 pounds. You add the
Yeah.
baby, it's like 8, 9, 10 pounds. That's a 20-pound load. So you want to be able to at least be able to lift 20 pounds on either arm. So I would say aging well is one of them. Of course, if you are vain, such as myself, I too am a vain woman, building muscle also makes you look great, right? Aesthetically, it builds curves in the places that you want it. You can create the illusion of an hourglass figure. So you can sort of build up, let's say, the shoulders and the deltoids and the lats and the back to create sort of a widening at the top of the body and then coming into the waist and then like building out the glutes and the quads and the hamstrings so that you're building out the flare, let's say, in the lower half of the body. So you have sort of the upper coming into a thin, like a slimmer waist and then flaring out. So you can sort of build the ideal body shape, which, by the way, that sort of hourglass figure is the figure that is most associated with fertility for one, but also longevity for two, right? Because
Yeah.
we know that having that thin waist relative to your hips indicates that there's going to be very low visceral fat. And we'll probably talk about this when we get into aging, but visceral
Yeah.
fat and the development of cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, dyslipidemia, and all the things that come with visceral fat is the biggest killer. This is the thing that we really want to be keeping to a minimum. So there's that. And then the other thing I'll say is, I got into fitness because it was really good money. It helped me pay my bills. But what I wasn't expecting, and is probably the biggest benefit that I extract from lifting now, is the mental benefits, because I am voluntarily putting myself every day, well, 5 to 6 days a week, in a difficult position where my muscles are asking me to stop doing what I'm doing because it hurts, right? Like I was doing chest and a bit of shoulders today, and it's like they're just like the muscles are shaking, and you can't like kind of rep out the full range of motion. Like I am voluntarily putting myself in discomfort.
Yeah.
And then what you grow from that is confidence. You grow confidence in your abilities in the gym, which happens very slowly over many years. You grow confidence in your ability to keep your word with yourself, right? Because you said, I want to get in shape. And here I am every day going to the gym at an ungodly hour or whatever time you're going. And you're keeping that promise to yourself. So you develop a sense of self-agency, a sense of self-trust. And then doing that hard work also translates into other areas of your life. So when you are able to sit in discomfort physically, you are also going to be able to sit in discomfort mentally. And certainly going through the pandemic and all of the mental health crises that we are now seeing, even like it makes me want to cry just with our beautiful kids, like the anxiety and the depression and the lack of connection that they feel to their community, to their peers, to their parents, to all the mothers, fathers, teachers, preachers. It helps to override that. It helps give you mental grit. So in addition to making you look great, it also helps you deal with some of the insults that life often throws at us that we sometimes have no control over, like the pandemic. So, and instances like that. So I would say that those are some of the big reasons that you would consider weightlifting. It's like, it's going to make you mentally stronger. You're going to be able to deal with a lot more than you thought you were ever capable of. You're going to look great. And then as you age, and maybe this is the part where we talk about aging, I don't know, but I'll just drop this here and we can come back to it. We start to lose muscle mass. So over time, it's like, where are you going to go? How much calorie restricting can you possibly do? Like I remember counseling a woman and she's like, I'm having like one egg for breakfast. And she had like I can't remember, her lunch was like a lettuce and some tomatoes. And I'm like,
and dinner is looking at someone eating at a restaurant.
Yeah, dinner was tea. It was like something like having tea. And I was like, okay, where are you going to go from there? You have nowhere to go. And then there's, we can talk about metabolic adaptation, but when you are eating so little calories, your body is not stupid. It's like, all right, this is a starvation situation. So we are going to slow everything down, including all the calories that I'm burning on the treadmill, including all the calorie output at the gym, including just like all of your calorie output comes down to conserve your life. So, so your metabolism tanks. Yeah.
I agree. So actually, to connect to that before, because you said so many wise things, one of Anastasia's research subjects, Anastasia, my wife, co-founder of Young Goose, chief scientific officer, etc. One of her research subjects were a reaction of brown fat becoming white fat. Or expression of something. Calls something called FSP 128, which basically is expressed when we're in a calorie deficient state. So obviously everything has its place, but our body, as you said, isn't stupid, and there are mechanisms that say, oh, I don't have enough calories. It doesn't mean I have, a wedding in a month. It means, I'm in a cave.
Like, we're going to die.
Yeah, we didn't hunt enough.
Yeah.
So I agree. Within what you said, and I do, I will tie it to aging, but first I would say, and you alluded to it before when you said about weight, loading your body with weight. What we're starting to see in research is that even though weight bearing is important at any age, the older we get, the less of what we call true bone density improves. What we're getting is allocation of bone mass, but bone density is harder to improve as you grow older. You can maintain it, but as you grow older, it's very difficult to add on to it. So understanding that this is one of the major determinants in old age of survival, it's imperative. And connecting to what you said about mental grit, which I couldn't agree with more, and I think this is probably one of the biggest drivers of aging as a whole. Just having obviously a good relationship with our stress hormones, with dopamine. Another part is research that came pretty recently out, is that when we do things that we do not like, and we kind of make ourselves go through them, there's an area in the brain that grows. And that area, which is identified as the area of agency, is also associated with longer life. So this is, hypothesized to be the center of the will to live. And when you do things again that are not comfortable, that you need to make yourself do them even though you don't want to, that area de facto grows, which I think is mind blowing.
I love that.
No pun intended.
Yeah, it's mind blowing. Yeah, I love that. I think that that's so beautiful. And this is part of the reason why my ongoing love for neuroscience will never die. I think that is so awesome. And for any of you that are listening, if you're like, gosh, like I kind of grew up like Steph did, and I was the cardio bunny. It's like, the best time to start training was 10 years ago, right? The second best time is today, right? So it actually, you still can put on muscle. To your point, it's harder, right? We are, as we move into perimenopause and menopause, less anabolic hormones available for women, right? Our estradiol's low, testosterone's low. So it's harder. But if you look, I don't know her, but she's like one of my secret heroes. If anyone wants to look up on her Instagram handle is Train with Joan. She started training when she was like 70. And she just a couple months ago was just on the cover of like Women's Health magazine. She's, 78 now, or maybe she's close to, I don't know her exact age, but I know she started training when she was like late 60s, early 70s, and she looks incredible now. So obviously as a 70-year-old, well into like post-menopausal, right? So it's totally possible for you to completely shape your body in the way that you want and turn some of the metabolic issues or whatever that you may be dealing with through lifting. And yeah, I want to make sure that everybody, like we used to think that, okay, once you go through menopause, it's like, you're done like dinner, right? But it's not true. Like you can still build muscle, maybe less than you could have when you were 25, sure. But that doesn't mean that your life is over. Like, we are 100%. Living well into our 80s and 90s now. So menopause, the average age is about 51. So you have a good 40 years, like you have a good, 35 to 40% of your life still ahead of you. So feeling good, looking good, performing well, these are all, I think, very important qualities to be thinking about as we age.
Yeah, 100%. So going into those, we thank you everyone who are listening, who are 25. I think you got it. Start training.
What an advantage you have at 25.
What an advantage.
Yeah.
Lift something heavy today. But talking about these people who are, hitting their 40s, 50s, 60s, what are some of the ground rules that you would like? Why would someone in that age, what are some of the benefits that they can get by starting to lift and by, going through a strength inducing program?
Sure. So some of them we've already talked about. So maintaining muscle mass is important. On average, if you're sedentary or you're not strategic about applying a mechanical load to the muscles, at least something like 3 times a week, we know that there can be a loss of muscle tissue at about a rate of 1 to 2% a year. Yeah. So you can lose over a decade, like 10% of your muscle tissue, which is very significant, right? So in your 40s, you may not even notice that up until 50, but you will notice that 50 to 60, right? Because now you're at 20%, like a 20% loss. And and that's just the tissue in general. Like we can maybe we'll get into, I don't know if we'll get into speed or power, but you can lose your speed, which is something that weight training also preserves, because you have that like forceful, you have to have a forceful contraction or
Mhm.
a controlled eccentric movement. Your speed also will degrade starting at like somewhere around your mid 30s, unfortunately, something like 6 to 8% a year. So you can
Wow.
lose, which is unbelievably fast. So something like weight training is going to help preserve that. The other thing that we want to think about as we age is we'll talk about bone density in a moment, but just from a sort of metabolic perspective, we will start to become more insulin resistant as a natural function of aging, meaning that the cells are, you might have normal blood glucose levels, like if you are doing your annuals or what have you, but you might be and the muscles are the first site where insulin resistance will take place. So even though you might have euglycemic blood glucose levels, it might be because your pancreas is working overtime to actually punch out more and more insulin to actually drive the glucose into the cells. So what that means, of course, is that the more insulin that your pancreas has to pump out, the more insulin insensitive you are going to become over a delta, over a period of time.
Yeah.
And so as that process continues, your ability to extract substrate from, like extract the glucose, let's say, from the blood and utilize it to create energy is going to go down. So one of the ways that we can overcome that is through resistance training. So muscles are, without, we can go into, I don't know how geeky you want to go here, but muscles can bring glucose in a glucose dependent or independent way.
Mhm.
An insulin dependent or an insulin independent way, not glucose. So when we are training our muscles, when we are contracting and shortening the myocyte, we're having the actin and the myosin and the actin, the sarcomere is getting shorter and longer and what have you. You are allowing for expression of certain glucose receptors, we'll say, to take up glucose from the bloodstream. So you are augmenting, you are improving, you are ameliorating your ability to overcome that natural insulin resistance that sets in.
Yeah.
So you want to be thinking about, as we age, we become more carbohydrate intolerant just because we're more insulin resistant, right?
Yeah.
So you can overcome that by training. So it's like, if you love your, ice cream, or you love your breads and your pastas, like make sure you're working out, right? Because you can continue to eat those things without much, even though I don't recommend eating them all the time. Certainly there's a time and place for everything, but you can overcome your body's sort of resistance to it as you age through training your muscles. So that's one thing. The other thing is your bone density, right? So, particularly for women, I think this is important. One of the number one, and you may not notice it in your 40s, but again, it is something you will notice in your 50s, and you will definitely notice it in your 60s, is if you are not training, like your muscles and your bones are like sisters. So as you are driving up lean muscle tissue by developing muscle, let's say, you are also driving something called osteoblastic activity, which is just a fancy word for bone growth. Okay. So
Mhm.
your bones are constantly, there's like, same with your muscles, there's constantly like a balance of like how much protein, creation versus protein degradation in the muscle tissue, right? How much muscle protein synthesis versus how much muscle protein degradation. In the bones, it's the same thing. How much osteoblasts, how much bone growth versus osteoclasts, which is bone breakdown. So over time, the tendency is to have more breakdown than growth, but
Yeah.
retraining is going to bring everything back into balance. So you're going to maintain and preserve your bone density as you age. And so when we look at a healthy bone, and I've seen just from the nature of my work, I've seen, I don't know, tens of thousands of x-rays at this point. A nice healthy bone is going to be sort of like a white, when you look at the outline of, let's say, a long bone, you're going to have like this beautiful white outline. And then you're going to have the cancellous bone. And so you're going to have cortical bone on the outside, and then there's cancellous bone in the middle. This is just for the nerds who are like, tell me more. Like, please stay with me. I promise I'm getting somewhere. But like the quality of, like the hallmark of a nice bone is actually its ability to bend. I know that we don't think about bones bending, but if you were to take a fall, for example, your bones are going to absorb a lot of that shock. And in order to absorb it, they have to be pliable.
Yeah.
When we age and we have more bone breakdown than we have more bone growth, they become brittle. They become less flexible. Bones actually bend before they break, but they will kind of, it's kind of wild to think about that, but that's what they do. And so if you have brittle bones or something that we call osteopenia, which is sort of the precursor to osteoporosis, is where we're, instead of seeing that nice white outline of that cortical bone on x-ray and like the sort of the grayish bone on the inside, you'll start to see almost like pock marks. It almost looks like Swiss cheese in the bone, where you're starting to see almost pieces of it missing because it's
Yeah.
degrading. And so if you fall, which for many women, this is kind of what takes us out, right? It's like I was reading the CDC. I was doing a presentation once and I was in the CDC's data for something, and it was 300,000 women or 300,000, individuals per year are hospitalized due to a fall. 90% of that is women.
Wow.
And so if you have a hip fracture, your chance of dying in the first year is 50%. So if you fracture your hip, let's say it was like icy, I don't know, you fell outside. We see that a lot on the East Coast. If you're in a place that has winter, like you slip on black ice or something, or even it just could be indoors, like you're slipping on a Lego or a carpet was, you slipped on the carpet or whatever, the edge of the carpet, and you fracture your hip, you have a 50% chance of dying in the first year, which is incredibly scary. The other 50% never make it out of the hospital. So they are now
Wow.
hospitalized permanently. And then of course the brain decline and the entire body just sort of decomposes at a much faster rate. So your risk for like things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cognitive, moderate cognitive decline, all of these things you are at a much greater risk for because of your inactivity. So
Yeah.
all that to say is that you are designed to move every day for every single day of your life. Every single day of your life, you are designed to move. So if you are not doing that, like I said, the best time to do it was a decade ago, 10 years ago. The second best time to do it is today. And you can hire a coach, you can hire a trainer, you can hire a chiropractor, personal trainer, a physical therapist, whoever, to kind of get you on your journey, to start you there, to give you some, basic tips and some, injury prevention tips and how to move weights properly if you're not familiar with it.
For sure. And I think, to your point about movement, sugar, and the relationship between that and the bone, we know that again, like if anyone tuned in because they only care about their skin, there is a direct connection between the ability to usher sugar out of our bloodstream into the muscle and our skin health. Why is that? It's because of one of the newer, hallmarks of aging, and something that definitely drives skin aging is called advanced glycation end products, which are, or AGEs, aptly named AGEs.
Best acronym ever, right?
Ever, yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
Which are derivatives of the excess sugar that we have in our body. And what they do, they literally attach to protein. And that is why it is obviously so stark in our skin, since collagen, for example, elastin collagen, are proteins. So they attach to protein and actually kind of break its natural function. So brittle skin, thinner skin, skin that doesn't bounce back into place, all of those things that we're used to require collagen to facilitate for us, becomes less and less effective the more AGEs we have, the more glycation we experience.
And you
I
also
think
need
there,
bones in
yeah,
the face, right? Like you need to have good skin on the face. You need, like you have, I think there's about 20 facial muscles. And one of the unique characteristics, of course, of facial muscles is that they attach directly into the skin, right? But
yeah,
they originate a lot of times off of bone. And our bones, over time, you have this resorption of like the zygomatic arch, let's say, like the arches here, the mandible, all of these different things. So if you are not, that's also like, just again from the vein of, or the vertical of being vain, right? Like lifting weights is also going to help preserve the bone structure of your, which of which your skin, of course, is attached to, which we want to have, beautiful skin as long as we can. Yeah.
Even specific. So there are actually a few ways of supporting what you're saying. The first, we just talk about growth hormone secretion. So obviously we're putting our body under load. We're going to have more growth hormone, which is important to preserve, the muscles, the specific muscles that are, by the way, also fat tissue, but the specific muscles that are characterized, the specific muscle fibers that our facial muscles are characterized with. That's number one. Aside from that, as you mentioned, our mandible bone specifically does tend to become thinner and more, definitely more fragile, but thinner and less voluminous as we age, which also contributes to the to sinking of skin. Because again, this is the backdrop. This is the columns that hold our skin in place, and obviously our mandible muscles, etc. The third thing is, especially if people do, and we never weigh in if people should or should not do fillers, but fillers, hyaluronic acid fillers, are being more and more correlated with less bone muscle and bone mass around our mandible.
Oh,
so
that's
zygomatic arc.
So people that are putting filler, can you put filler down here?
You can put filler here. So basically nasal labial folds.
The nasal labials. Yeah. Okay.
And today there are different type of injections that are not necessarily to fill up, but they are biostimulatory fillers, like Profilo, for example, which is hyaluronic acid based, which we don't know how they affect bone mass, but they're even like irrespective of having hyaluronic acid, classic hyaluronic acid fillers. And what we see with fillers is the gelling of the tissue. So your tissue actually becomes less different than a tissue of a person who doesn't inject fillers. And one of the things that characterize this tissue is less blood flow, which then would obviously cause, by the way, less healing. So if we have any kind of, trauma to the skin, the skin heals less well. And normally, imagine people who do fillers, who do those things, they also are doing, for example, resurfacing laser, or they're doing microneedling. They're doing things that require, recovery. So these actually kind of do not correspond very well with each other. And your bone, since there's less blood supply, which your bone relies on, there is deterioration of that tissue as well. All to say that there are things. So one of the things that you could do is either go get something like an airwave, which is this mouthpiece that you bite on while you're lifting weights. Mm-hmm. Airwave, it's called. And what
is that for the muscles of mastication? Is that like
yes,
to build
you basically put your jaw under load. Or you could, by the way, buy on Amazon or from a company called Jazzerciser, buy little round balls that you chew on for a short amount of time, which again are basically working out for your jaw.
It's so funny because you see, I saw, I think it was, who were they just commenting on? I want to say it's Miley Cyrus. Not that I don't know her. Obviously, I've never met her, but I think I saw it online where they were looking at her face and they were saying that she actually, that she either had like a buccal fat removal or that she put Botox in her masseters to try and have that more hollowed out look. And she can do whatever she wants. I think she looks great, don't know her, etc. But it's like, you're going to really regret that when you're 50 because you're naturally going to do that anyway. And that sort of hollowed out look is just going to be even more, maybe they'll have some, I don't know, some surgical intervention by then anyway that she'll jump on. But you see a lot of people doing stuff to hollow this area out. So it's interesting that you say, putting the masseter, which is like one
Under
of the biggest
pressure,
muscles, under load. I love that because it looks. I think that looks better if you have like.
I would also be very skeptical. I mean, whoever wrote that probably did it in good faith. I want to just assume, but it wouldn't be very congruent with high-end treatments, because most of the time in facial aesthetics, you could achieve whatever result you want by adding more volume, tissue, mass, rather than subtracting. Because as you mentioned, subtracting is irreversible for the most part, whereas adding is. So even an example that is not related, but one of the biggest fads of the last, I would say, like 7 years, is non-surgical nose job, where you would inject fillers, very, very, by the way, very rigid fillers, because they can be less or more rigid, on the tip of the nose and close to where your eyebrow is going to connect, to create a curve without taking out tissue.
That's dangerous, isn't it? There's like a
it's not necessarily dangerous, but it's definitely, as we said, it's definitely something that does not it's not harmless, since some of that tissue will then interact with the filler. But for the most part, the world is moving towards adding material. The world of aesthetics is moving towards adding material rather than removing material, if possible. And obviously it's correctable, right? If you did it wrong, you wait 9 months.
You can take it out versus trying to add back in. Yeah.
Well, or you wait. Normally people wait. They suffer through like 9 months of having that, and either do it again, better or not. But the bottom line is, I would be very skeptical if Miley Cyrus removed anything, because as in facial aesthetics, where our brains aren't really built to notice. They notice a delta, as you mentioned. They notice a difference rather than notice total sum mass, if you would. So adding material and creating an effect is as easy as removing buccal material
and to your point, I think that there's been many, not to pick on celebrities, but there's been many celebrities that have sort of overdone the adding to it, right? Where we sort of get like the pillowy face where like they can't smile because their cheeks are coming out. And
so this is something I actually spoke with Cameron Chestnut, who is like a celebrity plastic surgeon. And he was saying something very interesting, where your standard as far as like what looks natural shifts the more you put in. So if you've injected your lips once and you look every day in the mirror, in a few months, that is how standard looks like, and you want to have more, right? And then you want to have more. So definitely that pillow face, which can cause, by the way, he said, if you get into the injector office, and the way that they have their lips done or whatever that is isn't to your liking, you think it's too much, don't go to that injector, with respect to all the injectors, because again, what you're doing at the end of the day, you are looking at a person that thinks that this is the normal looking,
this is beautiful face. Or this is this ideal.
Is beauty.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we didn't even touch on protein, and we're running into an hour, which Chelsea, our editor, always tells me to stay within an hour, and I'm being a naughty boy and never adhering to it. But I do want to talk about protein, because I think it's very important.
Sure.
I also think it's very important to talk about differentiating between different types of protein, because you did mention protein before. But what I think it's important to understand, that protein is not a one thing. It's like a vitamin, but
gluten is protein. Gluten's a protein.
Gluten is protein.
Collagen's a protein.
Exactly.
Yeah, whey is a protein.
And even collagen, for example, is actually many proteins, right? It's many amino acids that create collagen. And if people eat only what we call muscle meat, which is meat, let's say chicken or beef that is from muscles, they're missing out on a lot of the benefits of, let's say, collagen or things like that. So maybe we can talk a little bit towards the end about, collagen and protein, and what you see as far as like, why did you say, for example, people are consuming less than what is optimal for them?
I think this is very true for women. I think that there is this I don't know, there's this subtle, persistent myth around, meat, men, like fire, barbecue. Like I think that there's something around animal products or consuming meat that I think, maybe it's an ethical reason, or I just think that there's not enough women consuming protein. So to your point, there's different kinds of protein. If we're thinking about something that is anabolic to muscle tissue, animal proteins are going to be the one that gets you there. So they are you have the complete essential amino acids, complete amino acid profile within a muscle meat. I think you can also get there with plant proteins. It's not that you can't, but you have to just be aware that what is anabolic to muscle tissue is when we look at the amino acid profile, it's usually looking at, in particular, one amino acid called leucine. And this is Dr. Donald Lehman's work and others, but he's one of the researchers that I am aware of and have followed his work for many years. Insofar as you need about 2 to 2.5 grams of leucine to sort of start the process of muscle protein synthesis. And you will get you'll get 2 to 2.5 grams of leucine in about in 20 to 25 grams of animal proteins. You might, and then it's high. And the other thing is it's highly bioavailable as well. So you're going to get like a 96 to 98% bioavailability in most animal products. And that includes whey. Mm-hmm. Plant proteins, you can also get there. Their amino acids are typically bound up by fiber. So they're less bioavailable, and they are usually, your body has to work harder to extract the proteins there. And so it's less bioavailable. So if you look at, let's say, a 96% bioavailability from a steak, let's say, if you're having, I don't know, tofu, tempeh, plant-based protein powder, you're going to be looking at somewhere between 40 to 60% bioavailability. So just in order to equate the same amount of protein that's anabolic to muscle tissue, you're going to need to consume more calories. So it's just something to keep in mind. Like you can totally get there as a vegetarian. I used to say don't like plant proteins. I've sort of softened my stance. Like you could totally get there as a vegetarian if you have ethical reasons, religious reasons, environmental reasons, whatever reason, you can certainly get there. You just need to do your jurisprudence. Like you just need to understand how much you're getting and where you're getting it from. One of the better plant based proteins, I would say, is soy. Mm-hmm. Which used to get a really bad rap. It's like, I feel like everything sort of goes through, it's like cholesterol and egg yolks were once the devil. And, soy was, it was this health food, and then it was a devil food. Well, for a lot of women in perimenopause and menopause, soy protein is a nice source. It's a phytoestrogen, so it's going to help sort of activate the estrogen receptors and all that kind of stuff. So, soy is also, I forget the exact number off the top of my head. It's very similar to animal proteins, like 94%, something like that, 95% bioavailable. So, your edamames, things like that, you're getting most of the proteins that are there. So that's one kind of protein. And I would say that if you are thinking about preserving muscle tissue, you want to be thinking about consuming at a minimum. So this is the bare minimum, 1 gram per ideal pound of body weight. So if you are someone who's like, I want to be 140 pounds, that means that you're going to be consuming a minimum of 140 grams of animal-based, or I'll say proteins that are anabolic to muscle tissue.
Yeah.
Collagen, as we've already kind of danced around, is not anabolic to muscle tissue in any way. However, it is a protein that is incredibly important, for this podcast, right? It's really important for skin health, hair, nails, all of that. And we also see a similar degradation. We were talking about muscle tissue degradation over time as we age. Collagen and elastin degradation is around 1% per year, starting in our mid to late 40s. Yeah. So we want to be supplementing with, I take 1 scoop of, hydrolyzed collagen, daily. Like mm-hmm. And I actually take it, even though this is not the right, it's just a little habit stack for me. As I'm going to the gym, I have like a tall glass of, it's actually like this water bottle I'll have. And I just put water and I put my collagen in there. It's just because my water where I pour my water and where I keep my collagen are right beside each other. So it's just like, oh, it's right there. I'll just put it in. So I'm not taking it thinking that it's going to enhance my performance at the gym in any way, but that's when I remember to take it. I don't count that towards my total protein intake because I am thinking about protein intake as it relates to muscle tissue. But it is, I think, important to be supplementing with collagen. And there's quite a bit of literature. I just put out a newsletter on skin health, quite a bit of literature to support the idea of collagen supplementation. And most studies were done somewhere in the 8 to 12 week range, and lots of differences reported in like suppleness, plumpness, elasticity of the skin, redness of the skin, all of the things that we're thinking about with collagen supplementation, seeing that after consistent supplementation after about 8 to 12 weeks in most subjects.
Yeah.
So very, very interesting. I'm very interested in it again, because I want to keep my skin and my hair. I actually have a little secret. I want to grow my hair down to all the way down to my hips. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm going to try. But I think a part of that is because I need to have collagen, right? I need to have like healthy hair, healthy skin, healthy nails. So I do that every day. That's part of my,
spermidine. I think spermidine
routine,
is the secret for that. If you want to grow your hair long, spermidine.
Yeah.
But just to connect to what you're saying. So you mentioned leucine. So for collagen, we really need glycine, right?
Yes.
And glycine, so glycine is a predominant amino acid within collagen that we drink as a powder, let's say, and also your body is not going to take that. My joke is your body doesn't take a banana and grows a banana on your forehead. You're not going to become a unicorn, right? Your body breaks down whatever you give it and then rebuilds whatever it needs.
Yeah.
That is why we can get, collagen built in our body, even if we don't supplement on collagen. But to your point, what we're giving the body is building blocks, which then it can translate to collagen production. So what you're going to find out, the reason it's going to vary from person to person, like how well collagen, affects them, because what I'm trying to preemptively say is some people will not see a change, but this is collagen is as important for them as someone that, looks completely radiant. And probably the person who looked completely radiant or the change is massive, it's because they really needed glycine, for example, very urgently, let's say.
Yeah.
And someone that doesn't see a lot of change, your body still requires the same amount of glycine. You might have gotten it from different sources, but it's still very important for you to supplement on collagen. I do have a question about glycine specifically and working out. There is some evidence that supplementing on glycine after working out improves your recovery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm not an expert on that, but that's what I heard, that it kicks you kind of to the reparative mode of muscles rather than the catabolic state of muscles.
Yeah, I think where the literature that I've reviewed is when you are working out, let's say, so you're working out to muscle failure, as we've been talking about. And your muscles become catabolic, to your point. So you can eat as much as you want. Like I eat prior to training, but your muscles are going to become, that's like the point. You're trying to actually degrade the muscle so that it builds itself back up anew. What you need is more of, you can certainly supplement with glycine. And I always, whenever I'm sort of making like a post-workout shake, I am focusing on the leucine content first, because what we're trying to drive is that muscle protein synthesis, so that we are now moving the balance from muscle protein degradation to net, like that hypertrophy, if you will. So I love to supplement post workout with like a whey protein powder. I often will put creatine in there. I'll put like a bunch of blueberries and stuff and what other things. But the glycine is, I'm not currently supplementing with glycine post workout. Does that mean that it's not useful or that it doesn't do anything? I'm not sure. I think that the big piece in the reparative process for muscle is things that are anabolic to the muscle tissue, which is going to be the leucine, which is going to be the whey muscle, the whey powder.
Yeah. To your point, there is a pretty old interview of Peter Attia and a professor from the University of Minnesota. And he claimed that we shouldn't even look at protein as protein. He's like, there are only 3 amino acids that really count. I think it was like leucine, isoleucine,
Valine, probably.
yeah.
Yeah.
And these are the ones that you should be counting as far as what you aspire to. This is the amounts that you have. Everything else isn't really considered as a protein that you should be counting, like a macro, basically. Which is, I don't know if I like this approach, because we have, as we mentioned, other needs of the body, but it is interesting, and I think it does open our minds a little bit to the fact that what protein, what source, what form we're consuming is as important as the word protein there.
Well, I think glycine, as far as the literature that I reviewed, I know that glycine is very important for women who have, or not just women, but I tend to see a lot of women and speak to a lot of women, men and women, with digestive issues. Glycine seems to be very, very helpful, at least in the, when we look at the endothelial lining of the lumen, there's a really high turnover rate there. It's like something like 3 days. So if you are supplementing with something like glycine, you're going to really help with that reparative. If you're someone who has digest, the distension and the bloating and that kind of thing. I mean, there could be many things going on there, but glycine supplementation does really seem to help at least the lumen, like the lining of the gut. In terms of, to your comment about the professor and the 3 amino acids, I do think that that's a bit, potentially more mechanistic, more, of a narrow viewpoint than I would take. But in the context of muscle reparation, he's not wrong, or she's not wrong, insofar as leucine, isoleucine, valine. These are the essential amino acids that we need to get from the diet in order to drive that reparative process in the muscle. Does that mean that all of the other amino acids don't matter? Of course not, right? But they have other, like, does methionine not matter? Of course it matters. Does all these, like glycine, all these other things, all of these things matter, but there's just different contexts, right?
Yes, 100%. Yeah. Well, listen, that's it. I'm going to get screamed at for a long podcast. But listen, this was Stephanie. This was like I think a very special podcast, since, as I told you off air, we tend to focus on the face. We tend to focus on wrinkles or hyperpigmentation, or do this, don't do that. And I think a lot of the times we forget that the body works as a whole. The body works intersystemically. So I really appreciate your perspective on aging as a whole, on optimal health. And obviously, I think at any age, it is important to go ahead and read a book such as your book, The Betty Body, or listen to the podcast, because what you're going to do is, again, you're going to learn through osmosis how to live a life which you are going to get be paid dividends on within any time frame that you're looking at, really, whether it is 28 days or whether it is 28 years.
Beautifully said.
So obviously we're going to have everything in the show notes, but what are the best ways to consume your information? We did mention it, but like where could people follow you? How does that look like?
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity. I would say that the first couple places mentioned already. So I have a podcast. It's called Better with Dr. Stephanie, because that's my philosophy on life. It's not about being the best. It's just getting better every day. So if you were listening to this show, it's the same. Just look up Better with Dr. Stephanie. It'll show up alongside this podcast. That's we have weekly. We have weekly episodes on how to live well. Essentially, like what does it look like to have a well-lived life? The other thing that I have just started doing, and I just love it, is my weekly newsletter. So it's free to sign up. You just go to drstephaniestima.com/newsletter. And the newsletter is called the Mini Pause. So it's like a play on the word menopause. So it's basically action items on, it's like a weekly roundup of like best action items for women 40 plus. So Actually, we just put out our last, at the time of this recording, last week we just put out one on collagen supplementation and skin. That's one of the things I'm actually asked a lot about. Like, what do you do for your skin? What's the products that you use? Like, what about your hair? What do you do for your nails? Da, da, da. So I was like, all right, let's actually dive into the science of collagen supplementation. What are some of the other aspects of promoting healthy skin from the inside out and the outside in? So what are the topicals that we can put exogenously? And then what are the, like are we hydrated? What is, what's red light therapy? Like all these different things. So the mini pause would be, again, another free resource. You can find me on Instagram, Dr. First Name, Last Name, Dr. Stephanie Estima. And then the book, any place where books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the places, called The Betty Body.
Amazing. Yeah. So again, Dr. Stephanie Estima, that was a pleasure. I hope we have you here again so we can dive a little bit deeper to some of the topics that we spoke about and talk about other ones. And again, I highly recommend, by the way, going back and listening to the interview that I really liked on Natalie
With
Needham's
Nat.
podcast.
Yes.
How is it
Superhuman
called?
Performance.
Superhuman Performance, yeah. Podcast, and registering to that newsletter, reading the book, listening to the podcast. Incredible information. So again, thank you very much.
Oh, the pleasure was mine. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Bye, guys.